Okay, so back to Daniel chapter 2. And the last time we looked at verses 29 and 30. While your majesty was sleeping, you dreamed about coming events. He who reveals secrets has shown you what is going to happen. And it is not because I am wiser than anyone else that I know the secret of your dream, but because God wants you to understand what was in your heart. So basically, he's saying it's all God. God is the revealer of secrets, and he does it for his own purposes. And then he makes the extreme point, it's not human but divine revelation, because God in his providence had selected Nebuchadnezzar as the recipient of the dream. And some people miss that in those verses. But Daniel was specific. It was, God chose you. He picked you for this dream. And that's really astounding. He's the first non-Jewish in the Old Testament man picked to have divine revelation revealed to him. And then we also looked at the fact that the world is in a devolutionary system right now. It's not evolutionary. We're not getting better. Everything is getting worse. So it's a devolutionary process. Man is not ascending, but man is descending. And you can't miss that. I mean, you just look around. And then we looked at Alexander Tyler, the Scottish historian, who stated, it was probably in 1750 or so, that every nation follows the same cycle, and democracy seems to follow it just as fast as, in some cases, faster than any other form of government. And the whole process, his whole theory was, you start out in bondage, then people receive a spiritual faith, then they get courage, then liberty. But it's at that point that things start to break down. He called it misplaced liberty. Then it grows to abundance. Then it grows to selfishness. Then it grows to complacency, then apathy. And I think this is where we are in America right now, dependence. And that's what they're trying to make everybody like here in America, to depend on the government.
Scott,
Yeah.
we went before Christmas break. We went in Tulsa at JCPenney, and there was on a Saturday there was one lady up above on the first floor working the desk, and one below. So consequently there were lines of people to pay. And so I had picked out a sweatshirt for Tammy, for Alexis, and it was on sale. But when Tammy got through going through the line and I was waiting for her out in the lobby, she said, "Mom, I'm just so tired. I don't care." She said, and they charged me the full price. So Miss Nama, she decided she's going to go back and tell them. And so I go back and I find this kid working there, and I told him the situation. I said, my daughter had been waiting in line for an hour or so. And I said, this was supposed to be on sale. Anyway, so he said, well, let me get you a manager. And I felt about that tall whenever she came back, because she said, I'll be so glad when Christmas is over. And I said, really? I said, and she said, yeah. She said, I had 12 people to call in that morning and say they weren't coming to work.
Yeah, that's the situation we're in right now. And you'll see that everywhere you go. Lack of people wanting to work.
You read says that people are now wanting to get paid on the day they work, and then they may not come back.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and people get a job, and within a week they want vacation. So, yeah. So we're kind of upside down. We're in that downward spiral. And we'll find out that this dream is kind of history in a nutshell. Everything from Nebuchadnezzar all the way to the coming of Jesus Christ is touched on in this chapter alone. And that's what is so cool about this chapter. And Daniel lets him know that, yeah, this is going to happen. It will come to pass. So the only one who had the answer for Nebuchadnezzar was Daniel. He's the only one. This was no time for playing games. Daniel stepped in to be the channel of God's revelation. And when he did, the king spared all the wise men, showing that that was not his intention. He just wanted to get his dream cleared up. So that brings us to verse 31. You saw, O king, and behold a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. 32. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of iron. And this is the metallurgy section. Yep. So archaeologists have discovered similar images made of several types of precious metals in Babylon, in all the digs around there. And then verse 33, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. And so this then turns into the action sequence after verse 33. Verse 34, as you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. 35, then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold altogether were broken in pieces and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So all you can say to that is, what a dream. So it starts with great image, and the Aramaic word here it actually means statue in Aramaic. It's not an idol that you worship, it's actually a statue. And it's enormous. Yeah, it was great, which is kind of an English word that doesn't really match what it's trying to say. But it's great in the sense of being immense or large in form, and by its size, the statue must have been overwhelming in its implication of power. So even Nebuchadnezzar, the absolute ruler of the world, recognized this as something greater than himself. And it said it was brilliant. And it probably follows that vividness of color. It was remarkable for its brilliant appearance. It reflected light, indicated by brightness, which is described as excellent or unusual in its brightness. And a word that might apply is splendorous. And that's actually a word. That means it was extraordinary. The metal in it was shining brilliantly. And you've probably noticed that when you've cleaned real silver, like you get, well, Marianne, you just did that. You cleaned those salt and pepper shakers, and all of a sudden they're just, wow, they shine.
They're supposed to shine?
Yeah.
My thought exactly.
Yeah. So the total effect of the image was terrible or terrifying in full effect. So Nebuchadnezzar, a fearless man that he was, cringed before this spectacle. So that's what's kind of cool about this. It's kind of like God brings Nebuchadnezzar down to earth. It's like, oh no, I'm going to show you something that's going to make you cringe. And one of the phrases, most terrifying. it inspired terror and fear, even though he couldn't remember, or he might have remembered some of it, but he was having trouble comprehending it. He could remember that it scared him. And I think that's why the whole chapter before, he was afraid. And that's probably why he got so angry. And it just wouldn't leave him. So now Daniel tells him what he saw. So you have types of metal, and this is interesting. It is made out of different metals. It starts out and it goes from gold all the way down to iron and clay. And actually, all of these in this list here kind of have their place coming out of those metals. So, a word meaning baked clay in Aramaic, shashaf, a potsherd basically. And you can define it as fired bricks or tiles. And it probably refers to those tiles that they used at that time. And that would have been what he saw. He saw the feet made out of a combination of iron and ceramic brittle tile. And we know how brittle that can be. And that's what they used to decorate that entrance to Babylon. It was fired tiles is what it was. So there's two things of interest here. The preciousness of the metal deteriorates from the top of gold to the clay of the feet. So it actually decreases in value all the way down. So it's top heavy. It's always, it's been, what is so cool about this, that there's a lower corresponding specific gravity of each metal all the way down. Gold is heavier than silver. Silver is heavier than brass. Brass is heavier than iron, and iron is heavier than clay. Iron and clay mixed. So it's a big top-heavy statue. And the approximate specific gravity of gold is 19. Of silver, it's 11. So you can kind of see what's going on. And of bronze, it's 8.5. And of iron, it's 7.8. And then the clay is even lighter than that. So it's really cool. You can kind of see this decreasing value all the way down the statue. And in other words, gold at the top is more than twice as heavy as the bottom of iron and clay. The whole thing could topple real easy. And brittle. It's getting more and more brittle as it goes down. In fact, gold is a very flexible metal, and it can't even be shattered, but iron and clay can. So that's one of the interesting things about this. And it's basically the whole history of humanity, the whole history of the Gentile world until the coming of Christ is going to be very precariously balanced thing. And you can see that when you study history. It is precarious. One change and a whole nation goes down the tubes. And it's constantly and increasingly getting worse until its final dissolution when it has smashed at the feet and it is blown away like dust in the wind. And then it has this, a stone was cut without hands, and that means it had no human source. No man made that stone. It hit the image at its feet of iron and clay and broke all of it into pieces. And that basically, the word basically means disintegrated. In fact, so much so that it became like chaff, which is some of the lightest stuff in the world. Of the, the summer threshing floors in Israel and the Middle East. They would understand that. And the wind just carried them away.
It easily took that and destroyed it from something big solid
Yeah,
to small,
just small, you know, to the point to where the wind could just catch it and it was history. It was gone. So this top heavy image is toppled by the crushing blow at its feet in rapid succession. The entire disintegration of the image follows, and all of its dust is blown away. The stone takes over the whole world, and all the rest of the stuff is gone. Not a trace. And that's,
Ever panned for gold?
no, and I don't really want to, but.
It's kind of fun.
Jim was thinking about this. Even the smallest pieces of gold will sink to the bottom of a pan of mud.
Yeah.
And to imagine gold being blown away by wind.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you could call this a hostile takeover. So it's kind of like a missile. It smashes all of the history of the Gentiles. Now, what a dream. And now you're to the point of how do you interpret that? And we will stop right there and pick it up next week, because Nebuchadnezzar is stunned by the obvious accuracy of the revelation to Daniel that he does not even talk. He doesn't even interrupt him. He permits Daniel to proceed immediately to the interpretation. So we'll pick it up there next week.